Hello. In part one of this series, we looked at several important themes in parts 1 and 2 of Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. Today we're going to look at several important topics in part 2 of the novel: the morning after the murder, Raskolnikov's ill-conceived plans, the way that he arouses suspicion, perhaps intentionally, and the death of Katerina Ivanovna.
He wakes up and it's like the first time since the murder that he feels like kind of like calm, and he has a sense of clarity.
What is a person who's living with, with heart-wrenching complication trying to do at all times? I would propose that he's trying to seek resolution. Yeah. And so Raskolnikov wakes up. He has this clear-headed sense of purpose. He's not necessarily sure why he has it, and yes, he's going to go to the police station. But it's all part of his human instinct to resolve.
I don't like when people dislike me,
Okay.
and so I apologize and I try to make things right.
What does this tell us about Raskolnikov and the complication of his motivation? Sorry.
I think it's really, I don't think he even knows what he's thinking.
Good.
Because
That's exactly right.
he walks out and he's looking at, like, he's just blankly walking through town, just looking at buildings that he's like, oh look, there's a building there, but I don't even know why I'm here, and then he just keeps walking.
Not even his murder was a great plan. Give me an example of really obvious things that he should have thought about that he didn't think about.
Whether or not you mess up on the crime that you actually committed, there's always like some way else like you can get caught.
And that's the instinct of a criminal to return to the scene of the crime.
Yeah.
Which he does.
Which he does.
Which he does. Why does he?
He kind of almost expects it to be the same as he left it. So he's expecting the bodies to still be there, the blood, and then he comes in and there are painters redoing everything. And he's just like, there was blood there. Where'd the blood go? There was murders here. Why are you doing this? And the guys are like, you're kind of crazy. And
making sure that she has something to look at when she turns her back, but he doesn't even think to close or lock the door. And the sister just walks in. He's like, well.
He doesn't even make sure that there's nobody else in there. He assumes, I guess, that she's alone.
But the main irony at this point is that he had previously thought of himself as this criminal mastermind. Right? Just like the whole Superman complex that we see as a subtext in this novel. Raskolnikov believes that there are people who exist on a higher plane.
He never really thought of a way out. He only thought of a way in when he was committing the crime.
Good.
He found
No
out
escape.
that the
No escape.
sister wasn't going to be there. So when they're talking about the crime and they say how, like, he's an amateur at the crime. And he gets really defensive about it because he's just like, oh, really? Well, what would you have done?
Do you feel like Zametov had any suspicions prior to this conversation? And how do we know that?
Because he's like, now I don't think you're... I never thought you less guilty than I think you are now.
Once Raskolnikov is in the house, at the scene of the crime, how does he behave in such a way that draws attention to him? Adams.
First of all, when he got to the hall room, he rang the bell.
So the need to replicate elements of the
Yeah.
of the crime.
And then the guy was like, "What are you doing?"
Well, when he first walks in, he doesn't say anything, which is kind of weird. And then the guys are like, what are you doing here? He goes like, oh, I'm just looking for an apartment. And then he goes like, wait, didn't a murder happen here? Which you wouldn't say if you were looking for an apartment and this is the place where you want to live. But didn't people just get murdered here?
Like
And he goes like, where's the blood?
When he goes back and visits the scene of crime, I think it's a bit of self-indulgence. First off, being able to justify that he knows what's a good thing is pretty egotistical right there. But I think it's also that this drives some desire to positively affect the world.
Like, he's there and it's like, bring him on the couch, and then Raskolnikov says that he'll get the doctor, and then she's just like, okay, and then she just tells Polenka to get Sonia. And then when Sonia comes, it's not too big of an emotional reaction. She just sees him, and then nothing really sparks her until he dies on her lap. I was expecting more from Sonia, but Katerina was just it's what you do, not what you feel.
Whenever the priest showed up or whatever, she was he was just like, you need to forgive him and everything. You need to so he can move on or whatever, without having that overbearing feeling that he failed her.
It's all part of the redemption process. Is it possible to be redeemed even for a crime as terrible as a double murder?
Because you saw Katerina holding back tears, and she cared for him. I think she was genuinely upset that he was dying because she'd already lost one husband.
Just as humans, we have this tendency to be over hopeful even though we don't want to be, and I feel like even though he was kind of a bad husband and drunk and stuff, there was always that hope deep inside of her that one day he'd get his act together, and with his death it's the finalization that he'll never do that.
The way Katerina acts kind of contrasts with Raskolnikov's idea of atonement. You know, he helps out this family, and he's there for Marmadov in his last moments, so he's kind of giddy about, you know, I'm off the hook, my guilt's gone, but in reality he's still a murderer.
Thank you for watching. As you can see, Dostoevsky had a lot to say about the human condition. And over 100 years after the publication of this novel, those themes still ring true in the hearts and minds of today's students. Come back next time as we continue this discussion.